What is the worst case of bad parenting you have ever seen? I've spent a good part of my life working with kids. I started as a teacher, and though I've moved on from the classroom, I still work closely with youth. You see all sorts of parents in this line of work, from the incredibly supportive to the downright negligent. It's a mixed bag, really. But one parent-teacher conference a few years back, in middle school, really stuck. It was the usual chaos of conference day. Teachers were scattered in the gym, each stationed at a table with folders of student work, ready to meet the parents of our advising groups. My advising group had a range of kids, but one boy in particular, let's call him Sam, stood out. Sam was a quiet kid, often lost in his own world, daydreaming during lessons, and struggling to stay focused. Despite this, he was a good kid. No behavioral issues, just the typical challenges some kids face in middle school. As I prepared for the conference with Sam's parents, I flipped through his folder. It was a mix of assignments from various subjects, showing his strengths and areas that needed improvement. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary when his parents walked in. They seemed like a nice, average couple, mom and dad both present, which is always a good start. We started going through Sam's. His mom was quiet, listening intently while his dad asked questions here and there. It was clear they cared about their son's education, which is always a relief. We reached a science test where Sam had made several careless mistakes. Instead of brushing it off, his dad took the time to go through each problem, reworking them with Sam, explaining where he went wrong and how to get the right answer. I was impressed. This was a parent who was genuinely invested in his child's learning. "You go, Dad," I thought, inwardly cheering. And then it happened. As we moved on to Sam's next piece of work, his mom, who had been quietly listening, suddenly leaned forward. She pointed to a drawing Sam had done in art class, a colorful piece full of abstract shapes and patterns. "Is this supposed to mean something?" she asked, her tone sharp. I was taken aback. Art, especially for middle schoolers, is often more about expression than meaning. I explained this, trying to ease the tension, but she wasn't having. "This is pointless," she said, her voice rising. "He should be focusing on real subjects, not wasting time on this nonsense." Her words were like a slap to the face, not just to me, but to Sam, who was sitting there staring at his shoes. Before I could respond, his dad jumped in. "Honey, it's just art. It's good for him to have a creative outlet." His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a hint of frustration. "Creative outlet," she snapped. "He needs to be learning things that matter. Science, math, things that will get him somewhere in life. Not this garbage." She waved her hand dismissively at the drawing. Sam's dad took a deep breath, clearly trying to keep his cool. "He's just a kid. Let him be a kid." "That's the problem," she shot back. "He's too much of a kid. He needs to grow up and start taking things seriously." I watched the exchange, feeling helpless. I wanted to defend Sam's right to enjoy art, to be a kid, but I also didn't want to escalate the situation. It was a delicate balance, one I'd encountered many times before, but never quite like this. The rest of the conference was tense. We moved through the remaining work quickly, the air thick with unspoken words. When it was over, Sam's parents stood to leave. His mom walked out first, her back rigid with anger. His dad lingered for a moment, looking at me with a mix of apology and helplessness. "Thank you," he said quietly, before turning to follow his wife. I sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. It was a stark reminder of the different pressures kids face at home. Sam's dad was right. He needed to be a kid, to explore and enjoy his childhood. But his mom's attitude was all too common, a push for academic achievement at the expense of everything else. A few days later, I saw Sam in the hallway. He was the same quiet, daydreaming kid, but there was a new tension in his shoulders, a weight that hadn't been there before. I wanted to tell him that it was okay to enjoy art, to be a kid, but I knew it wasn't my place. All I could do was support him in the classroom and hope his parents found a balance at home. I still remember that day as if it were yesterday. Parent-teacher conferences are always a mixed bag. You see the good, the bad, and the downright ugly, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that afternoon. So I'm sitting there, going through Sam's folder of work. As I mentioned, Sam's a quiet kid, prone to daydreaming and sometimes struggling to focus. Nothing out of the ordinary for a middle school. We went through his science test first, where he had made some silly mistakes. His dad, who seemed genuinely invested, took the time to go through each problem with Sam, explaining where he went wrong. I was thinking, wow, this guy really cares about his son's education. This is great. Then we flipped to the next paper, a language arts assignment. Sam had scored an 85%, which was respectable, but what caught my eye were the doodles, intricate, beautiful drawings that bordered the margins of the paper. I was about to compliment Sam on his artistic talent when, without warning, his dad backhanded him across the face. The sound was sharp, cutting through the air, and Sam's nose started bleeding immediately. Time seemed to freeze for a moment. Then his dad started screaming, "These stupid drawings are distracting you from learning. If I ever see you drawing again, unless you're making straight A's, there will be hell to pay." His voice was filled with rage, and he continued to berate Sam, who was cowering in his seat, tears mixing with the blood dripping from his nose. I tried to intervene. Maybe enrolling Sam in an art class would give him an outlet for his talent, I suggested, hoping to diffuse the situation. But then the dad turned his fury on. He got up, almost nose to nose with me, and started screaming. "You're a stupid bitch who doesn't know shit about raising children," he yelled. "You have no idea what it's like." I was a first-year teacher. I had never faced anything like this before. But in that moment, something snapped. I grabbed Sam's hand and started leading him to the office. The dad tried to yank me back, but I turned, and in the scariest, most authoritative voice I could muster, I said, "If you lay a hand on me or this child again, you will leave this building in handcuffs." He froze, stunned, as I marched Sam to the office. The secretary, seeing the blood and the tears, immediately called the police. I made my first ever report to DCFS, shaking as I relayed what had happened. The police arrived quickly, and Sam's dad was taken away in handcuffs, still screaming obscenities. Sam was taken to a safe place, and I spent the rest of the day in a daze. The reality of what had happened slowly sinking in. I had known that some kids face challenges at home, but seeing it firsthand was a whole different experience. It changed me, shaped me as a teacher and a person. The following days were a blur of meetings with school administrators, DCFS, and the police. I learned that Sam had been placed in a foster home temporarily while his situation was being assessed. It broke my heart to think of what he had been enduring in silence, the creative outlet he had found in his drawings, now tainted by fear and violence. I kept teaching, but I was more vigilant, more aware of the signs that a child might be struggling in ways that weren't immediately visible. I wanted to be a safe space for my students, someone they could trust, someone who would stand up for them no matter what. As the years passed, I continued to see all kinds of parents. Some were supportive and nurturing, while others were demanding and harsh. But I never forgot Sam and his dad. It was a constant reminder of the impact that a parent's behavior can have on a child, and the responsibility I had to protect and advocate for my students. Working with youth now, I carry that experience with me. I see kids who are dealing with all sorts of challenges at home, and I do my best to support them, to let them know that they matter, that their feelings and dreams are important. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. And every so often, I think of Sam and wonder where he is, hoping he found a place where he could draw without fear, where his talents were celebrated, and where he could just be a kid. That hope drives me forward, reminding me of why I do what I do, and the difference one person can make in the life of a child.